So I wonder, has Shovel Knight gotten fatter since the first game? Let's check and compare. Yes, he has, or maybe he's been to the gym and gotten muscular. Shovel Knight Dig has now been released, but why should you buy this game? The question is whether this game maintains the same high level as many other games in the Shovel Knight universe. In this video I discuss how Shovel Knight Dig is experienced on Nintendo Switch, what's new this time, and should you get your own copy. Shovel Knight has undoubtedly been a success story for Yacht Club Games. In the beginning, the project started as a Kickstarter, and after the product was finished, it was met with positive reviews. Some media even claimed that the game was one of the best of 2014. Those are big words. I mean, Shovel Knight certainly has the ingredients needed to make an excellent 2D adventure game, a reasonably comprehensive game with challenging levels and fun bosses, as well as a retro-inspired music and graphics. It's a winning concept, but the question is whether this game, Shovel Knight Dig, which has been created by Nitrome, can take the game series in a new, interesting direction. Just to clarify, there are similarities between this game and the classic Shovel Knight, but a lot is different too. You should not expect a side-scrolling game where you jump between platforms. In this game, you dig your way downward until you reach the next level. But like the original, a boss awaits at the end of each stage, just like we've seen before. At first glance, Shovel Knight Dig is more reminiscent of SteamWorld and Spelunky. Besides all the digging, this game can be compared to a roguelite. You have one life, and if you die, you start over. But some things you find or buy you keep permanently. Each time you die, a portion of the collected money goes to your bank. This way you can build up a budget and spend on items, armor or shortcuts. Yeah, it's possible to start from a certain level, but it's a feature that must be unlocked by paying. The game's story is straightforward. Shovel Knight is resting when Drill Knight and his gang come by and steal his treasures. This is not good, and now Shovel Knight must go underground and find Drill Knight. The question is what Shovel Knight will find. Who will he face, and what are the real goals of Drill Knight? Well, you will find out if you play the game, but it's not a remarkable story by any means. However, there are a lot of NPCs in this game that are both well known from before, but also some new faces. For example, the well-known armorer who is nowhere to be found. He is somewhere in the underworld. Or Canary Scout, who gives tips on what to do with eggs that you sometimes find. In fact, it might be a good idea to talk to different characters. Sometimes they give good advice that you can use to your advantage. Let's discuss gameplay. First of all, you mostly move downwards and use your shovel to dig forward. Each level is divided into a couple of parts where each part ends with a reward or that you finally meet a boss. Surviving and not taking damage has a high priority in the game because there are few health upgrades. Sometimes you get lucky and meet an NPC that sells health, but it doesn't happen every time. And it's not a forgiving game. As I mentioned earlier, if you die you start over from the beginning, which also affects your health pool. By default you always have 4 health nodes, and this is the starting point, so even though you may have built up a large health bar during the game, it goes back to 4 if you die. But I found that if you buy the shortcut, you get a little extra health. This can actually be quite a stressful game. There is no visible clock counting down to a loss, but if you take too long, a giant saw wheel will appear. You can guess what happens if it hits you. In other words, it can be beneficial to keep a steady pace, get to know the environment, make wise decisions, but make sure you don't stand still for too long. Several times I saw how the roof started to implode. This is the signal that the saw wheel is approaching and it's time to speed up. Along a level there are also 3 golden cogwheels. These can be very valuable to pick up. If you find them all, you get the opportunity to get a complete life refill at the end of the course, or you choose a random item, very important if you're low on health, and probably necessary for survival. Down in the cave there are lots of secrets and hidden rooms. A special statue can be found in this room. Here you have to sacrifice an item to open a new door. So I sacrificed my magnet, went into the next room where Chester was hiding in his coffin. The problem is I had no money, so could not buy anything he was selling. So all in all, I lost my magnet, plus I couldn't buy anything. To be honest, this is bullshit. I felt cheated. I had everything I needed, and now I have nothing. But you can also find other important NPCs, for example Tombola, which gives you the chance to get more health or other things. It's a lottery, but sometimes you get lucky. In fact, it's details like this that make the game much more interesting. The levels are randomly generated to some extent, so you basically never know who you will meet. Sometimes Master Argus appears. He sells weapons, but they are very expensive. I rarely could afford to buy, and even if I could, I usually refrained from buying. One's shovel is a very effective weapon in itself, and I'd rather save the money for something else. There are also tons of items in the game, but to be honest, it's quite possible to do without them. Most often you get the opportunity to buy things that give you a new attack, but in many situations the shovel is completely superior and you see your sub-weapon unused. However, there are some armors that are very useful, especially the red one, which halves incoming damage, but at the same time I have to be a little careful. Sure, I've tested quite a few weapons, but there are so many that pop up when you least expect it, so if you have an opinion about all the items, which one do you prefer to use? Feel free to comment below and let us all know. The game essentially consists of 4 different worlds and some bonus locations. Each world has its own unique style, both in terms of design and enemies. For example, Mushroom Kingdom. This is the first place you visit. This is perhaps the place that most resembles going down an actual mine. The main colors are purple, brown and green, and I think they go well together. Otherwise, the game offers a nice variety of different environments, from the secret fountain to the evil knight's own castle. Above the ground, the background is very nice to look at. The parallax graphics look good when moving sideways. At the end of the levels you fight a boss. Here it can be an advantage to be well prepared, for example having enough health. The bosses themselves need a fair amount of beating before they go down, so the fights can take a while, but I found it's like trial and error. The bosses use a certain number of different attacks. Learning their movement patterns and what weapons they use may be necessary. The difficulty really lies in the fact that you cannot play the boss over and over again, because if you die on the boss, then you have to replay the whole course until you get another try. Therefore, I discovered that there is a certain nerve when you meet a boss, kind of like it's now or never, and when you succeed, it actually feels like an achievement. This is very good, I like it a lot. There are also tons of different enemies in the game, and usually they are tied to the world you're in. What's fun is basically every enemy has its own strength, or rather, something to watch out for. Some enemies can fly, others dig holes, but the toughest is probably the Mega Mask. It appears quite late in the game, but does a lot of damage if you're not careful. I like the variety, it means that you have to learn something new all the time. Shovel Knight Dig is a game that is definitely worth the price. It currently costs $25 in Nintendo's eShop. It's different compared to, for example, the first Shovel Knight game, which means that you should not expect a Shovel Knight 2.0. You have your shovel, you dig down, you find treasures, eliminate enemies and bosses. It's fun, but quite challenging at times. The level of difficulty is quite high in my opinion. The game also flows well on Nintendo Switch. In docked mode there was really only one time when I felt the game suffered from lag, and it doesn't really matter because it happens in a short cutscene, but in the game itself there is nothing disturbing in general. I didn't experience any crashes either. The only thing I question is all the items. They don't always feel as effective as one would have liked, except for the red armor, which I think is really good. There are some other passive items that are useful too, especially those that give resistance to lightning and fire, or the iron that decimates the boss's health. To be more specific, I'm talking about the offensive items, for example those that give a new alternative attack. Do you find them useful? With that said, I want to hear your opinion on all the items in the game. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, I review new games every week. Have a nice day, see ya!